Okay, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to start my video and we'll go ahead. Somebody's saying they don't have a microphone on their computer. That's okay. If you have any questions, go ahead, write them in the chat. That's totally fine as well. Okay, so we are talking about making a sensory kit and using visual supports. There may be times during this webinar where I might reference some things that we have here and show you some visual supports, but they're also going to be on the slides, and I'll also be verbally talking about them in case anybody is on here on the phone. And if you have questions throughout, go ahead and write them in the chat. We'll also have time at the end, hopefully, for questions. So I come from the University of Rochester. We're in developmental and behavioral pediatrics. Just to give you a framework for where I'm coming from, we offer clinical services in adolescent and youth diagnoses and clinical work. We have our research programs, and we have a community program aspect of us as well. That's the area I work for, and we serve individuals with disabilities across the lifespan. The organization is called Strong Center for Developmental Disabilities. And being a part of Strong Center for Developmental Disabilities, we are what's called a University Center of Excellence in Developmental Disabilities. We promote independence, productivity, and integration and inclusion. So part of our work with the Strong Center is we are participating in a Department of Health project called IFACT, which is Improving Family Centeredness Together. So this webinar series is part of the New York State Systemic Improvement Plan, which is aimed to improve family centeredness and early intervention. So you can see in this image here, we have a 10 webinar series. And we already went through our first one in September, which was about engaging families with Facebook groups. Thanks for those who were able to participate in that one. Today, we're doing one on making a sensory kit and using visual supports. And then upcoming, we'll have 10 more different topics from child development to parent advocacy and cultural responsiveness. So we have a wide range of topics. The dates are not set yet for November through June. We'll try to get those out to you as soon as we can. I did want to apologize for the late notice on this webinar. We are still working out the kinks of the series and trying to do the best we can to get them to you as soon as possible. But I am glad so many of you were able to join. And on that note, just a little housekeeping tips. So we will be recording them. They will be available for viewing after the fact. On our website and on our YouTube channel, which is Pediatrics URMC. I will say we do not have that running yet. We have had some staffing changes and we're working on getting that in place right now. So I'm hoping by the end of the week, we'll have that website available and I'll be able to send out a page for everybody to see those recorded webinars. After today's webinar, we will have satisfaction surveys. The link will be available here and I will email it out to all the participants. In order to receive a webinar certificate, that's the easiest way for me to keep track of everyone who has been able to view the webinar. There will be a little box at the end of the survey where you can say you want to receive a certificate and you can put your first and last name so that I can send those out to you. They are all done manually. So patience is much appreciated for those certificates. It typically will take me about a couple of weeks to get them all out. And then again, feel free to use the chat to submit any questions. I have it pulled up and I'm happy to pause and answer them as we go. So today we're going to be talking about sensory supports and visual supports. So first we're going to start by setting the stage for sensory supports. We will talk about why provide sensory supports, understanding sensory needs, sensory seekers versus avoiders, different types of supports you can use. We'll go over how to make a sensory kit, and then we'll talk about visual support, so understanding them and different types and how to use them. So it's a lot to cover in an hour, but we'll do our best to get it done. And this is meant to be an introduction. We're happy to provide you with resources to dive deeper later. And there may be questions that you have that I can't answer. And if that comes up, I'm happy to find the answer for you and get back to you at a later time. So setting up the environment with sensory supports. The reason we want to use sensory supports is to think about inclusion. So making sure we're ensuring everybody is valued in the spaces that they're in, and implementing the necessary supports to be able to do that for them. It also takes into account the unique aspects of an individual, knowing who they are, promotes positive behavior, and of course, helps make them feel included in the space. And the reason we're thinking about sensory supports today is it's considering how sensory differences may impact other behavior you might be seeing. So there might be times where you're seeing behavior that's considered challenging or is getting in the way of different services or therapies, and there could be some sensory things going on that are leading to those behaviors. So we're going to talk a little bit about some sensory supports and how you can use them to promote positive behavior. So some different considerations when you're thinking about the sensory world. It's basically your senses, right? You're seeing, taste, sound, touch, all of those things. And so some things to think about are the space that you're in. How big is that space? Is it tight? Are there a lot of people? Is it overwhelming? Or maybe it's a small room one-on-one and there's not as much going on. Lighting is a big one. Some people are very sensitive to fluorescent lighting, or there could be some flickering lights. It could be too dark. There could be lights that are certain colors. All of these things may impact someone's experience and how they react to it. Noise, another big one. There could be background, there could be sirens that you may not notice or you may notice. HVAC equipment, things like that. Fire drills are a big one for kids early on in school and throughout school. Even for me, they're a little surprising. And then you go into equipment and materials. So maybe you're playing a game and there's a texture that's really unpleasant to a child, or maybe they can't get a good grip on it because of the texture, or they find it frustrating in some way. And then also thinking about some supports that are available to address all of these things. Another thing that can impact the environment and someone's sensory experiences is, of course, other people. So when we think about sensory needs, it's helpful to think about two different categories, but also to acknowledge that children can be in both categories. They can move from one to the other, or they might typically fit one of these ideas, but it's not a fixed thing. It can always change. So a sensory seeker, or someone who is sensory seeking, may be described as overactive. They may eat excessively or overstuff their mouth. They may be okay with loud noises, climb too high, not be able to sit still, spin, move their hands and arms, things like that. So those may be some things you see, and there may be a number of other things. One thing to think about with sensory seekers is they're looking for more stimulation. They're looking for more options when it comes to their sensory needs. On the other side, you have a category called sensory avoiders, someone who may be sensory avoidant. They may be more picky, more sensitive to food, to activities, may want more space to themselves, things like sensitivity to light, sound, touch, food, textures, all of those things. Walking on their toes is another thing you may see, and avoiding physical contact with people, all things that you might see in somebody who is either a sensory avoider or is in a mood where they are sensory avoiding. And like I said, these can switch from person to person. Are there any questions so far? Just want to make sure I pause too. Okay. So moving on to some of the supports that we can think about. There's a few different senses to think about. As I mentioned, we don't typically talk about taste because this isn't really focused on feeding, although that's another sensory aspect of somebody too. We're not going to focus on that in this webinar. But the other four to think about are touch, sound, sight, and smell. Does anybody have any ideas of, I mean, there's some pictures you can see there of ways to use supports, but does anybody have any experiences using any of these supports for these four senses? And you can feel free to write them in the chat too, any ideas or experiences. Okay. We actually developed a tip sheet on this about a year ago. Okay, so somebody said stories on top with headphones. So headphones, it's a great one. Sound canceling headphones, that's another great one. I have one in this little sensory kit right here. Stress balls, I love stress balls, just to give my hands something to do. And kids love them as well, many kids. Moon sand, yes, we have some of that too as well in our mobile sensory room. And people talk about using sound canceling headphones at the car wash. Yeah, so it sounds like headphones is a very popular one. It's easy to bring with you on the go. Squishy toys, rice, so something for those sensory seekers. It's nice because the different people bringing up in the chats, it's a combination of sensory seeking and sensory avoiding. So we have some things like headphones, so you may be sensory avoiding, and then we have things like Play-Doh, so somebody who wants the seeking. And then there's some essential oils. Yeah, so, and of course there's like some considerations with using something like an essential oil with kids, but there are some diluted ones, lavender, and that can help with calming and for sensory seeking. Okay, great. Thank you everyone for your ideas. We have talked a little bit about the seeking, the avoiding. We've talked a little bit about the different areas of someone's senses to consider. So why or what do you include when you're making a sensory kit? How do you know where to start? It starts with considering the individual, as I'm sure you all are well aware of in your work, that considering the specific needs of that child and the specific sensitivities to that child, and then using past experiences with what's worked for other children to help you think of what may work for that specific one. So observing behaviors like, are their hands over their ears when they're hearing loud noises? Are they looking for something to hold on to? Do they like picture books? So all of these things, getting to know the child, getting to know what they like, what they don't like, what they may be sensitive to, are all good cues as to what you could use in a sensory kit. And then of course you may have a more general sensory kit, like I do right here, that has a lot of different options depending on the type of kids you may be with, so that you can bring it with you on the go and have something for most of the kids that you work with. So some common examples may include sunglasses for sensitivity to light, headphones, which actually can be used for both seeking and avoiding. So you could play music in the headphones for seeking, and if they're avoiding, they could just wear them to avoid the loud sounds. Tissues, so allergy season, maybe some kids may be really frustrated with their nose running and it's bothering them and it's making it difficult for them to engage. So just having tissues on hand can be helpful. Stress balls and other toys, like a light toy. And then visual supports is also a great way to engage the child's sense of eyesight, to help them relax or understand what's expected of them. And things like picture books too is another great option. Okay, so I'm gonna just go through a list of some evidence-based ideas for including a Kami kit, and I'll go over why they're useful. So I'm going to be showing you guys a document that was developed by the Inclusive Recreation Resource Center out of SUNY Portland. They did a great job coming up with a list and what it is, how it can be used, and then supporting evidence for using it. So I'll pull that up for you guys right now. And then we will talk about it. Okay, so hopefully you all can see it. It starts off talking about what a calming kit is and how it can be used. And at the end, there's a reminder that it's always best to individualize whenever possible. I know this is not always realistic, but if you may be working with a child and you can see that they really would benefit from this type of thing, it could be a conversation with the family to helping the family develop one that's individualized for them that then they bring to whatever services they're receiving. But again, for one that you might have with you, it may be just the best option, the most feasible option to have something that can fit most of the children you're working with or you have in the classroom. So the first item on this list is a fidget toy. So I actually have this kit right here. So this list will encompass everything I have in this little kit. They call them calming kits, but it's just different language. Sensory kit, calming kit. So we have like the little fidget cube, which comes in a box. Let's see if I can pull it out. A lot of these items are nice and small. This one is just something like that could keep a child distracted or help them calm down or give them something to hold on to and touch. And then you have some evidence for why. Again, provides tactile stimulation. And also a lot of these items may not be suitable for every environment. So if you're doing like a hands-on activity, maybe giving a fidget toy isn't the best idea because they may need their hands to engage in the activity. Somebody asked if the article is the article printable? Yes, so I will make sure I have permission to send this out to the list, and I will include it with the email. Once this webinar is available online, I will include this in the email. And I can link to it on our website where the webinar will be hosted as well. Okay, so Kleenex. So it can be sanitary, they can be used, they can actually be like torn up. And then it's like a soft object, so it can be calming as well. We have those. Of course, you're gonna have to restock on tissues. It's not one size, but lasts forever kind of thing, like this little fidget toy. And then you have some of these sensory avoiding type items like noise canceling headphones, which are a really common one, great one to have on hand. You can get them for really, they're very inexpensive to have. And then it's good to have a few different size options too. Okay, so we have the noise canceling headphones, we have sunglasses. Again, another low cost item that will work when a child might have sensitivity to light. And it's good to have a few different size options too. If you're working with really little ones, you may have some kids that are a little older, a little bigger. There's some wet wipes included. This is for children who may be developing OCD and want a sanitary environment. Maybe they have just a sensory sensitivity to, again, like allergy season, or they may have gotten dirty or something like that. It's just good to have these things on hand so you can address the situation if it comes up. If you don't have access to a bathroom right nearby, or you're at the park or something like that, or you're doing a messy activity, it can also be just a good reminder to the child that you have these on hand if they need it. Let's see, what else do we have here? Okay, so we have some of the visuals that I mentioned earlier. So this one specifically is a calming scenes photo album. So in this album, you have different scenes that are just calming environments. So you have like a child in nature, some cool things to look at. So it might be just a nice temporary relief for a stressful environment, a chaotic environment, and it can be used to de-escalate if there's a child who's overstimulated. So that's a great one. You have little stretchy smiley face people. I like that name, that's funny. Little guy here. Squeeze toys, there's so many options when it comes to squeeze toys. There's so many available, and they're another low cost thing to add. Toddlers react to the calming pictures. It's a great question. I would have to look at the study, what the age group was, in that I imagine so. I imagine that these would still be visually, a distraction, something calming, regardless of age. It may require a more focused toddler. I'm not sure the answer to that question, but I can look up the study that's listed there and see what the age group was for the study that they have. Looks like there's 3 studies too, so I imagine so. Really, really, really little guys, maybe not. Okay, and then we have some visuals. So we'll talk about these in a little bit. So you have a communication board listed there. There's some calming cards. You have a social story about feelings and understanding emotions. And then there's keychain visuals, like a whole list of different things that might come up. Yeah, these are calming cards. There's the keychain right here that has like a lot of different options. So line up, stop, bathroom, things like that. Okay, so those are some visual supports. Wristband, so that can also help with anxiety, overstimulation, things like that. So all some great ideas. I'm sure there are many, many more ideas you could include, and we'll talk about a few more. Let me switch back to the PowerPoint. So some tips for making a sensory kit. There are some great opportunities to use them. One is during periods of transition. So whether it's transitioning from one program to another program, from one staff member to another, one activity to the next, all periods of transition can be difficult, especially when it comes to new environments, new sights, new sounds, new people, all of those things. And so that can help a child to cope with that change. Another great idea is to create it with the child. So maybe you have different options of items you could add, presenting them with the choice, asking them what they like. All of those things help you individualize the sensory kit to the child. And then if you don't have the option to individualize it for each person, you could have a few different versions of a kit that maybe one is really geared towards sensory seekers, one towards sensory avoiders, maybe one's really geared towards like highly overstimulating environment. So there's a few different ways that you could have a few different options with you on the go. They're really easy to just like throw in your car and bring with you. We bring this one to presentations when we talk about sensory supports, and it's just great to have to show people about it. A lot of times this isn't something people have seen before, so you may be working with a family and the parent really hasn't heard of this idea before, so it can be great to just have different options. Oh, great. Thank you for doing that. Yep, there's a link right there, it looks like. Okay, so another couple tips. Reevaluate its effectiveness over time. So don't expect it to last and be effective forever, because people change, people are always changing, and it's always good to adapt it as you go. So as the child is changing, as their needs and desires and preferences change, maybe put in a few items, maybe you take out a couple more, you change out the squishy ball, you might change out some of the visuals that you have with you. Just constantly be thinking about how it's working and maybe what items could be useful to add into a sensory kit. Another thing I wanted to show you guys, which is behind me over here, is a mobile sensory reel. So we have this suitcase here, And inside this suitcase, we have a lot of different items to support the sensory needs of children, whether they're seekers or avoiders. So you can see the picture here on the PowerPoint. So it comes with a tent, it comes with light toys, a weighted blanket, the sand. Let's see if I open it, I may never be able to get it closed. That's the question, but I do want to get it open. It comes with a lot of different toys. Okay, is it working for everyone now? I saw the connection was lost for a second. I apologize for that. Okay, I'm just gonna go ahead and open this suitcase to show you guys a few of the things that are in here. So the goal of a mobile sensory room is to have a number of different options for kids, and maybe it would work really well in a program setting where you have a lot of children. Maybe you don't have the opportunity to have a separate room or a separate space for the child to take a break, or maybe you need something on the go. Maybe you're doing programs out in the community, or you're seeing kids out in the community. It can be a great thing to take with you. It's fairly low cost compared to what you would think of as a sensory room. Okay, so in this suitcase, you have a lot, so many fun things. So there's like these little squishy balls. There's like a sand. Oh, somebody. I'm just gonna mute everybody just so it's not, the audio is not confusing. Like, I don't know what these are called, but as you flip it, the sand kind of falls down. So visually it can be a nice distraction. Oh, and the nice thing about all these items is they fit into the suitcase. So you don't have to worry about having everything separately. You can just have it all in a suitcase. Some fun little blocks that have some nice texture on them. Someone mentioned earlier moon sand, so that's one of my favorite things. It just feels so cool. So we have some moon sand in here. We bring this with us to presentations in the community or community events, and we'll set it up, and the kids love it. All of the kids love it, and it's a great opportunity for some kids who may have disabilities with some typically developing kids to kind of come together and explore the different sensory toys and share some common ground. Because the truth is that these things, that we may see, you know, more sensory avoiders or more sensory seekers with children with disabilities, but we all have these behaviors and desires to have some stimulation in our environment. Okay, so that's our mobile sensory room. We will be we will be actually creating a number of these and providing them to some community partners. So if you're interested in applying for a mobile sensory room, you can send me an email where we're going to be working on that and having an application process, a really brief application process for people to be able to add these to their programs. I'll work on putting that away later. It's kind of a puzzle trying to get this thing zipped up. Okay, so that's our mobile sensory room. Okay, so just some health and safety to consider as an early intervention provider. It's important to adhere to New York State Department of Health, the agreement in health and safety guidance, document whenever delivering early intervention services. Always protect the health and safety of children with respect to any equipment, materials, or items you're using. And then make sure the equipment and materials are appropriate for the child's developmental age and skill. So there are so many different items you could be bringing, but they're not going to work for everybody at every age or developmental level. And then again, making sure that the equipment or materials are they're good condition, they're not leaking. You know, some of those like like the sand, this thing right here, like if that was leaking, it could potentially be dangerous. So make sure they're in good condition, they're cleaned regularly, they're disinfected, and they're free of lead. It's really important. Especially some of those stress balls, they can like pop and explode, and you don't know, I don't know what's in those things. So just making sure it's safe. Somebody asked, how long does it take to set up? Setup is really quick with the mobile sensory room, probably 10 minutes. Tear down's a little bit longer, just trying to get it back into the suitcase. So I recommend, if you do decide to do one of these, take a picture of the suitcase opened up so you know where everything goes when you're done. Oh, so I just have a couple of questions to ask the group, and try to use the chat, and I'll give you a couple minutes to think about it. So we talked about the first one a little bit earlier, but where could you see yourselves adding some of these supports? Maybe you really liked a certain idea that was presented, or you want to try making a sensory kit. Any ideas about what was presented so far and what you're hoping to add based on what we talked about? Travel sensory tent with supplies. Yeah, it's great. It's really great. And definitely credit to, again, SUNY Cortland's Inclusive Recreation Resource Center. So I can look and see if they made that list available of what they included here, because we will be making some of these. So helping parents set up a sensory kit. Absolutely. I think a lot of the kids you may be working with might be really young, so this may be the first time they've heard of that. On the go kit, yeah, definitely. And there are some parents who are really skilled with this. They have like 3 different kits, and they develop them with each child, and they have one for school, one for recreation. So there may be families that you can work with that may be able to help you come up with tips for parents. Let's see, several kits for a toddler classroom. Yeah, that's great. Mobile sensory room would be fantastic. And this one I think was a few $100s, but it doesn't have to be that expensive or elaborate. You could find ways to cut the cost pretty significantly. Fidget cube, yeah, definitely. If the child is wanting to have some of that tactile stimulation, it's a great idea to have something they can have on their hand. Yes, feel free to share the link. If the mobile sensory kit was available, feel free to share the link. Thank you, Catherine. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. It's so much more fun when people engage back and forth in these webinars. Katrina, it looks like your question was cut off. Setting up in the home. Oh, so bringing like the mobile sensory kit to a home? Yeah, as long as the parents are on board with that, I don't see why that would be a problem. I think presenting it to the parents of this is what you're planning on doing, and this is why, I think that would be absolutely fine. Okay, so now we're going to kind of transition to the visual support side of things. I would take well, it depends on who's purchasing it, of course, but with a mobile sensory room, I would make sure you have a plan for who's going to have it, and keep it in your car, or bring it back to your office and then bring it to the home when you need it, because there can be times where it might be left somewhere and you don't know who has it. It can get tricky. So moving on to the visual support side of things, again, this is really related to what we were talking about earlier. Again, thinking about supports you can provide to children just to help them be included in their environment, and to also help them with promoting positive behavior. So some of the benefits of visual supports, I'm sure you all know many of these things already, and feel free to share some of the benefits you've seen in the chat. Your feedback is very helpful. So some of them are increasing social skills. So you might have social stories and might go through some ideas of how to handle a specific task, activity, program setting, and may prepare a child for some of those social skills before they're there. Promoting appropriate communication, so learning how to ask for things, learning how to say no, how to say yes, how to request specific items, ask for breaks, say they need to go to the bathroom, all of those things. Visual supports can be really great for that. They can support routine, predictability. Visual schedules is a great way to help a child learn what's happening throughout the day, what they have to do first before they get what's next, and then aiding in redirection to the task. So maybe there's some challenging behavior or distraction, and being able to show a child that there's only 3 minutes left and then they'll be moving on to break. And so helping them complete task and redirect to a task. That's a great one. So it helps the child make more appropriate choices and decreases the use of no. So I think if there's a certain activity and there's like a visual, there's options for what they can do. So presenting the options or showing them what's expected to get to the next step in the activity or the next step in the day, then they know, okay, this is what's next. So I'm not going to say no, it's going to happen regardless. So some examples of visual supports, social stories. So that is a visual guide describing social interactions, behaviors, situations, concepts. So let me see. So there's like this one right here, which is an interactive social story for emotions. So in that way, it starts off with saying, I feel, and the child has to choose like what emotion are they feeling, and then it uses the visuals from the emotions movie, and it talks about how to handle those feelings. So I feel happy. When I feel happy, I feel safe and calm. When I am happy, I feel like smiling. It helps a child understand which emotion are they feeling. My teacher and classmates like when I am happy. So that's one example, and then it goes through each one. So sad, how do you feel when you're sad? I feel like crying. I take a deep breath. So at the end of this social story, it says, I take a deep breath, I count to 10, I think about the people that I care the most. So things like that. And so, and these can be used, something like this with somebody who's very young would obviously not be done independently. So with a teacher, they would walk through this, they would read it to them, they would show them the pictures and help them work through those emotions. And then this is just one example. They can be more simplified, they can be more elaborate, they can be used with any age depending on how developmentally appropriate they are. You have visual schedules. Do I have an example of that? Yes. I have a couple examples. Well, one here. So this is like an example of getting on the bus and off the bus. So if you're going to school or you're going to a program, see, this could be used to prepare a child for that transition of going to school. So this is what you do. You get on the bus, you find an empty seat, you ride the bus, you talk quietly, and you get off the bus. So that's a schedule of what happens with that one activity, getting on and off the bus. It can be more specific, it can be more simplified depending on what the child needs. You have picture communication system. So something like this, these two boards right here. Hold on one second. So let's see, this one provides a good example. So they could choose this picture to show that something hurts. And so they learn that if something hurts, they can point to this picture and they're communicating that with you. Hungry, thirsty, yes, no, all of these things. So using visuals to communicate if a child is having difficulty communicating with words or with other signs or something else. And then thinking of visual supports, I mean, we all use them, you know, the bathroom signs, we have the international sign of accessibility. So things like that help us realize that this is something that we're all using in our lives. We just may find that more structured use of them or more thoughtful use of them may help young children learn to communicate, transition to routine, all of those things. But we're all using them really. Phones are a great example of using visuals in our lives. So I'm just going to go through some examples of visual supports, and feel free to, oh yeah, that's a great point. It helps children, it helps empower students. Yeah, and I think there's a way to use them that can really do this well, you know, making them with a child, understanding this is giving them a way to communicate in a way that's empowering. So giving them more of a voice, and then again, individualizing them to the children that you're working with so that it's meeting their developmental level. So if you look at this image right here of wash hands, some children they might not need those steps broken down that way. Maybe they just need a symbol of wash hands to know that that's what they're doing next. But other children maybe need the steps broken down even more. And so just considering how that child, where that child's at, and if it's not working, then readjusting the support to make sure that it's accessible to the level of the child. So here you have wash hands, you have a picture for each step of the process so the child sees it, you have the words above it, and then the steps that are there. And so the first time you're using this, you're not necessarily just going to have this, you know, above the sink, but you'd walk them through each step and then referencing the schedule so they can get a sense that this is a resource that's available to them, so that you don't have to walk them through this process every time, but that they have a visual support to use. But it will take a while for them to necessarily be moving towards independence using visual supports, but it can be very helpful in that transition. Here's one for good morning. So you get up, you go to the bathroom, you have breakfast, you brush your teeth, you get dressed. So just reminding them this is the process in the morning, and then preparing them for more independence as they get older. Here's another one about using the bathroom and then washing hands afterwards. This is combining the bathroom process with washing hands. And then you have this one, which is more of like a full day schedule, which is individualized for that child. So this may be a specific day where they're going to the beach and they're swimming. So they wake up, they go to the bathroom, they have pancakes, they remember to put their sunscreen on, and then they got to go to the beach. So for some kids, this might be like a highly anticipated activity, like going to the beach or swimming. Other kids, it may be potentially stressful. So having this on their schedule gives them the chance to anticipate what's next and also prepare for it and cope with it. So maybe they know what's for dinner or whatever it may be. And there's great technology too that can create these so that you can really individualize them for each day, each activity, that kind of thing. Okay. And there's the riding the bus one that I showed you, the morning schedule. Here's another idea. This is like a token system, or this is using like a, this is a reinforcement board, sorry. And so what you have is you might have like 3 different reinforcement choices. One of them fell off, so you might have like video game, iPad, there's a goldfish here, whatever the reinforcement is. And the child would be able to choose like that they want one of these 3 things, and they would move, you would move it to up here, and it would be just a nice reminder that if you have to go through an activity, a step during the day that is really undesirable, that there's a desirable thing happening next. So reinforcement, and we'll talk about reinforcement in just a second. Right there in that picture, that's a token system. I don't have that, I don't think, but it's there for you to see. And so same kind of thing, you have like a reinforcement that's chosen based upon what the child wants. So maybe they want to play with trains, they want to wear a princess crown, they want to read a book, whatever it is. And the goldfish represent earning a token for completing a task or positive behavior. So maybe they're sitting really nicely, like, I love how you're sitting. Here's a token. They get to put it on their board, and then they earn their stars. Or they, you see these all the times, like earning your marbles or earning whatever it is for some reinforcement or some reward. And these can be really helpful just to remind the child that there's something coming and to also promote positive behavior. So rewarding positive behavior and using visuals to do it. And then here's just another example. I think I have it on here. Yeah, first Zen board. So this can be used in a few different ways to remind a child of reinforcement that's coming, but it also can be used just to anticipate what's next. So you could use it kind of like a modified schedule where you're just showing them, first we're doing snack time, and then we have nap time, or first we're practicing numbers, and then we have a break, whatever it may be, just to give them a sense of what's coming next, so that when that activity comes, it's not such a surprise. Okay, so just a slide just to briefly mention, if you do or are coming across the use of food as reinforcement, it should be nutritious, non-toxic, and based on the child's developmental abilities and considering allergies. We don't recommend using food as reinforcement. There are so many other options that are have more positive outcomes and don't create some associations with food, and they're just much safer. So things like really whatever the child likes. Maybe they really like singing with you, so you could do like a song, so we're working for a song. Or there might be a favorite toy that they have. Maybe they really like a certain video. They really like some sensory toys, or they love sensory breaks. They could be working for that. So there's a lot of ideas for reinforcement. A couple other ideas, stop, go. These are some really easy ones to make too. So you could have like a stop, go board. Oops, that's upside down. So this would just signal like, stop, that's not a behavior, that's not an activity that we're doing, or that's not something we're doing. And then go would be like, that's great, you're doing a great job, keep doing that, things like that. Timers, you could use like an electronic timer, but you could also just use a visual reminder that you'd have like ranging from like 1 to 20 minutes or something. Then you show them the 5-minute warning or the 1-minute warning. Again, helping the child know what's next. As adults, we tend to dictate our own schedules. So we know when we're moving from one activity to the next, but children don't have that same luxury. So giving these reminders can help them adjust to maybe an activity that they really want to be over, or maybe they're really excited for what's next. So saying like 1 minute left and then we're doing this. So helps them get through that next 1 minute. So here's a slide on reinforcement. Really the key here is just individualizing it and always evaluating it. Same thing with the sensory stuff we talked about earlier. Children change and adapt, they get bored with things, and so things are going to be effective at first maybe, and then just make sure it's still effective, make sure it's still what they want, and always present new options too. So visuals can be a great way to present the new options. You can show a visual of like bubbles and say like you want to work for bubbles or you want to work for Play-Doh, and then you can get a sense of what they're wanting. Asking them, giving them opportunities to show you what they want, observing, asking families what they want. There's so many great ways to really individualize this for each child. And it could be simple things. It doesn't have to be a physical object. So like I mentioned, singing songs, playing games, all of those things can be reinforcing to kids. So lots of great options. Okay, and then when you're trying to find visual supports, So a couple of suggestions. Autism Speaks Autism Treatment Network has a visual supports and autism free toolkit. And I know it's like in the Autism Speaks world, but it really can be used for all children. So the link is available there. And you have access to the PowerPoint, so you should be able to click the link in the PowerPoint that I sent out. Pinterest has some great ideas. So you could look up like hand washing schedule, first then board. Pinterest is great for ideas on this. A lot of parents will use Pinterest. Google search is a really easy option. If you're worried about things being having copyright restrictions, one way to avoid this is to, when you're in the Google search images, you can hit tools, user rights, and labeled for reuse. That way you can use images without any concern. Another really great option for finding like visuals and pictures is a site called Canva, which has a free version, and there's lots of cool things available there, lots of graphics. And you could create a schedule there. So I'll put it right in the message so everyone can see it. I talked a lot about this in the Facebook webinar. Canva's awesome. I use it all the time. And then a few tools that you'll want to have if you're making visual supports is a printer, so you can print them out, so they're not just on your computer. Laminator, so that they last. So like this, if this was just a piece of paper, would be gone in a second. So laminated, it lasts for a really long time. So you can get laminator. You want to get laminator sheets as well. And the specific laminator will help you learn which ones. Velcro is easy to find, staples. Like you can actually, one tip for using Velcro is you can cut them in half. So this one's like a half piece of the circle, and that way you make the Velcro stretch a lot further. So that's one tip. And there's a great software called Board Maker for making visual supports. I don't have a lot of experience with it, but I know people who do, and they use it all the time. So boardmaker.com, I believe, is another option. So last couple slides. Oh, this is the last one. So tips for making visual supports. Again, individualize is key. That's like the one true thing across all of this is individualizing supports. And then another idea is, instead of just looking up Google, take pictures of actual items, locations, events, people. So if you have specific pictures of those things, that's actually the most effective than symbols that you'd find online. So, and it can actually make the idea resonate more with a child. So if they're going to the park and they really love a specific park, taking a picture of that park and using that on their schedules or boards or visuals of certain people, like taking pictures of certain people if you're doing social stories, of certain items like a toy that they really love. So and that also makes the issue of finding the visuals a lot easier. And then again, another idea is to make them with that person. So maybe you have your computer with them, or you talk to them about what they want to work for, and you show them what you're doing and you get them excited about using the support. Those are ways to make it so that the support is more effective when you start using it. And the last tip is consistent use matters a lot. These aren't going to be effective if the child isn't used to using them, if they're not familiar with them and there's no routine established around them. So if you want these to work, using them on a consistent basis, predictable basis, and just making sure that the child knows what the routine looks like with the visuals. That definitely matters and goes a long way. Okay, so any questions? I have a couple slides. Feel free to put your questions in the chat. I'm just going to show some like wrap-up slides, and we'll get to questions if there are any. There's some resources available. Oh, that's a great tip. So is that so the question is it a question or a suggestion? So we had somebody say allowing the family to use them with their child. Certainly engaging the family around using visuals and talking to them about how they use visuals and working with them to learn about what works, what doesn't. Those are all great ideas. So a couple resources, I put the Boardmaker Online website, so it's boardmakeronline.com. There's pexusa.com for the official picture exchange communication system. I mentioned Canva, which is just canva.com, and that's for making visuals as well. It's a little tricky to use for making visuals, so I didn't put that on here, but these two are great options. Lesson Picks is a great online resource. Awesome. So Lesson Picks, if folks want to see that in writing, it's in the chat. Online resource, reasonably priced, has boards people have already made, game boards, and a wide range of pictures. Thank you, Melissa. That sounds like a fantastic suggestion. Meeting with parents and all therapists involved. So when it comes to using visual supports, I think the consistency of them is what can be the most impactful part, and same with the sensory side of things. And so I think making sure everybody is on the same page and knows what works and what doesn't will only help the child more. So if that's a possibility to just meet with everybody, whether it's one-on-one or you have a group meeting, bringing them into team meetings and just kind of getting a sense of like this visual, I think it would be really great for this child. Let's all try it, see if it works, or working, getting everybody on board is only going to help, I think. Chris asked, is there a way to watch the replay of the video? Yes, there will be. We don't have the web page up yet. I'm hoping by the end of the week it will be up, and that will be the page where all the webinars are hosted. And on that page, we'll also provide links to the slides. Okay, let's see. The last couple of resources, we have the online toolkit through Autism Speaks and Autism Up online social stories. There's some, Autism Up is the location actually pretty close in Rochester. They have one for feeling safe, explaining a sad event, wandering, safety cars, and resources on elopement. And again, these are, autism organizations, but these are not autism specific. It just, you tend to find a lot of resources for visuals in the autism sphere. So you may see something that looks like it's specific to autism, but it may not be. It may be able to be used for any child. I don't know about the answer to that question, Andrea. I would ask the Department of Health about that one. I'm not managing the credit side of the webinars. Okay, and then the last thing is just feedback on the webinar, and completing the online evaluation will allow me to have the right information so I can create a certificate of completion for all of you. And again, I'll be doing those manually, so just giving me a couple of weeks to get those in, but I will get them in as long as you complete the online evaluation. I'll be able to send them out. So that's all I have, and we're wrapping up at 3:59. So we made it all the way and we fit it all in. So thank you all for being here, and if you have any questions